Hello everyone! I am waiting for some Sealer to dry, and in the meantime I figured I'd make this quick little video for you guys about different types of sculpting epoxy and what you would use to customize your model horses. A lot of the times there's a lot of questions, which epoxy should I get? You know, which one's better than the other? And the answer to that is one is not necessarily better than the other. It's more of how you work and what works better for you. Some people like softer clays, some people like firmer clays. It's really up to you. So I figured I'd go through the ones that I have here and let you know the consistencies and how they work, and then you can make that decision for yourself. So first, I want to go through clays that you do not want to use. You do not want to use these clays, so I'm going to show you now. Sculpey, Super Sculpey, you do not want to use this for your briars or stones or whatever model horses, because you cannot put these in the oven. You cannot put these horses in the oven. The plastic is not the same as certain things that you can, like the vinyls and stuff that people do, even though I really wouldn't do that either, but you do not want to put these in the oven. They will melt, it will be stinky, it will ruin a lot of things. So you do not want to use Sculpey. However, it is possible to use it. You have to hand cure it with a heat gun on the model. Or you can sculpt your stuff, bake it, and then glue it onto the model with super glue. But it's just a pain in the butt. I wouldn't recommend it. It's also not as sturdy as epoxy. Epoxy would actually bond to the plastic. This won't really bond to the plastic. However, you know, you can take certain measures to make sure it stays, like, you know, putting epoxy and stuff, liquid epoxy, you know, whatever. But again, wouldn't recommend it. So that's the first one you do not want to use. You also do not want to use any sort of air drying clays. You don't want to use, you know, like this stuff. I don't have any other hand. Terracotta, modeling clay. You don't want to use any air drying clays at all. They have a lot of shrinkage, so they'll just crack right off your model. They're very brittle. It's not strong at all. It won't hold anything. You know, like how Sculpey would technically work in some cases, this just, no, it's just not going to work at all. So no air dry clays at all. Epoxy is not an air dry clay. Epoxy is a two-part curing clay. It's a chemical cure that actually bonds with things and does some sort of chemically magic. So that said, here's the epoxies I have that I often use to customize my model horses. I guess I'll move him out of the way. We'll start over here. Magic Sculpt. I like Magic Sculpt a lot. It's probably would be considered my go-to in a way. However, this one's kind of good anyway. But anyway, it's pretty soft. It's not sticky soft in my experience. It smooths and sands really well. These Magic Sculpt and Epoxy Sculpt are the two general ones you're often going to see people use in the hobby. These are the two most popular because they're the most, I guess, consistent in a way, and they're just good to use. So it's kind of clay-like, but not quite. It's kind of like a mixture between clay and Sculpey the way it works. Both of these. This one a little more clay-like than the Epoxy, and then again you have, this is the natural. Different colors also behave differently. So the whites are like super white, and white is going to be sticky and stuff. I haven't tried any other colors in the Magic Sculpt. This is the natural, which is a gray. It's a little old, so you can see kind of that yellowish color it gets. That's totally fine. It still works. This has lasted me for a very long time, and that is the other part. So what you would do with all of these, you mix equal parts of one to the other by volume. So, you know, you get two balls the same size and you mix them until they're uniform. So yeah, Magic Sculpt is very good. Epoxy Sculpt is the other more popular one here. This is actually the white. The one I had before this was the natural, which is a darker gray. I had gotten the white because I wanted to clean up some resin castings that I was selling and didn't really want it to, you know, like the gray epoxy on the white thing. It just, you know, aesthetically didn't look great. Either way, you know, it's fine to use either one, but I just like the aesthetics of just being pure white. However, this is not pure white. The pure white Epoxy Sculpt is actually the super white, which I hear is very sticky to use. But the white is very similar the way it acts to the Magic Sculpt. The natural is a bit firmer than the Magic Sculpt. It's a little harder to smooth into things and stuff. However, it holds detail very well, and you know, they're pretty comparable with the way they are, but this one is actually a lot closer to the Magic Sculpt, the Epoxy Sculpt white. So yeah, these two I would recommend, one or the other. Now you're getting into some fancy stuff over here. Oh, where did my... Okay. This is used in gaming miniatures and stuff. I did not like this one. It's very firm. It does say you can play with the ratios to get it softer, but no matter how much I did, it just was not soft. It was almost like epoxy sculpt after it's almost cured, and it's very, very firm. So it's really hard to smooth into things. However, if you're sculpting armor or something rigid looking, this would probably be very good for that. It holds detail extremely well because it's very firm. So I wouldn't, I wouldn't recommend this for your general customizing because it's so difficult to smooth into the model and stuff. Sand's fine and stuff, but it's just, sculpting on top of things, like maybe a mane or a tail, like the structure of it, but once you're starting to get into like finer stuff that needs to blend, it was just a pain in the butt. I wasn't a big fan of it. I'll show you. Oh, I didn't show you what the epoxy was. Epoxy. See, this is fairly newer, as you can see. Dark gray is one part, and the other part is like that whitish gray, like the Magic Sculpt. Very similar. This actually comes in two tubes, a dark tube and a light tube. So these are also a little more difficult to, cut off and stuff like that. I like the tubs, like the tubs like this, because you could store it easier. But yeah, so that's that. Milliput. I like this a lot. This is very, very clay-like. The thing when you start getting into these types of things, they're a little more expensive. They may be comparable to the price of this, but you get, look how much more you get out of this. So this also comes in tubes. This is the yellow-gray. It is very, very clay-like. It can get a little mushy on you, but that to me is very much like how you would work in like water-based clay, like a terracotta or something. It kind of reminds me of that, but it's an epoxy, and I like it a lot. It's a yellow color when it's cured. So I would recommend this. However, again, in the long run, it's pretty expensive, especially if you're doing bigger things, like traditionals and stuff like that, and really resculpting stuff. This one I just got very recently for Christmas. I dig it. It's similar. It's almost like a cross between the Milliput and Magic Sculpt or Epoxy. It's a little more clay-like than the epoxies. This is the white, although it was kind of a light gray when I used it. Actually, I can go get the model that I used it on and show you what it looks like. Okay, this is the one I used it on. It's like sort of like a whitish, grayish, yellowish color, as you can see there, a lightish gray. But cured good, and it was more clay-like than the epoxies, but not as clay-like as the Milliput. So I like it. There's a nice chunk in here. Again, also more expensive in the long run, but probably less expensive than this because of how small this is, and I think these are probably about the same price. So these come in also like a tube-like type thing in plastic, which I don't really like because, the air gets in there and it's not good. So you do what you can. This stuff does last a while. If it does get all crusty and yellow, it still should work. It just might be more difficult to work with. Like, this is really old, so when I use it, it actually cures up a lot faster and might be a little crummier to work with, but it still works. Amazing sculpt. A lot of people look into this when they're starting out, probably because of the price point. But I would not recommend this for beginners. I also contacted them when I was first looking for epoxy and asked about it, and they even said flat out to me it's not for beginners. This is meant more for carving your details than it is for sculpting them. It's very saggy, very soft, sticky. However, it's great for prepping. It's great for getting into pinholes and, smoothing against the model and stuff like that. But I would not recommend this if you're going to be sculpting stuff like tails and manes and things like that. At least not, your first few. Once you start getting used to it and try it out, yeah, you can, work with it. And it's great stuff because it sands beautifully. And here's the one part. Now, the thing with these two, I don't know if it's the containers that they come in or what, it does not last as long as the other stuff. Here's the other end. It's kind of like these, even though they're old, I could still get them to cure and work. This, the last time I used this, I couldn't get it to cure right, and it crumbled off. So, and this is probably about a year or two old, and this is probably going on like 3 or 4, and it still works. So, just be aware of that. Don't buy more than you think you're going to use in, you know, a period of time. Always go with the smallest thing, because, I mean, this is the smallest size, and this is, you know, that's a lot. So, and then the FX clay is also from the makers of Amazing Sculpt. I would recommend this one over the other one. This has a lot less sag. It's softer than the epoxy and the Magic Sculpt, but it's not very sticky, so that's good. It will kind of maybe sag, but in general, it's pretty good. I used it a couple of times, and I definitely recommend it over the Amazing Sculpt. So, I mean, even this, you know, this one, I would, if you want to go with something from Amazing Sculpt, go with this one. If you don't want to, you know, buy the big jars of this. Although, Epoxy Sculpt, I think, does come in this size also for you to try out. So, anyway. And this here we have, it's called Green Stuff. I would not recommend this. It's mostly used in miniatures and gaming models and stuff like that. You just cut, you know, mix, it turns green. It's like working with chewing gum. I don't know, I kind of liked it in the beginning, but you can't really get any detail into it. Like, think about sculpting with chewing gum that, you know, stays where you put it. It's just, it's weird. It's, you know, it's good for certain things, and it also kind of cures flexible. So it's good for, like, say, making like unicorn horns and things like that, where, you know, they're gonna break if it's a brittle or stiff thing. So it's got some of its uses, but I really wouldn't even recommend bothering with that. Oh, here I have some black Epoxy Sculpt, which is also a lot stickier and softer than regular Epoxy Sculpt. Like I was saying before, the colors act a lot differently. Also, the black gets all over your hands. It's so dirty. Ugh. But as you can see here, this is getting a little old, so it's like yellowing. But again, that's Epoxy Sculpt. That's just the black one, and it's sticky. And yeah, so I hope this helps you guys decide on which epoxy to go with for your first run. It's really fun to work with, and if you're looking into customizing and stuff, start small so you don't get so frustrated, you know, like a mane or a tail. Aside from, you know, chopping up is a lot harder than you think it is. So anyway, I hope this really helps, and give me a like, a share, comment, all that good stuff, and I will see you next time. Have fun and happy customizing.